So, I mean, how much of all of this stuff, though, is related to family? Because when we go to the 12-step fellowships and stuff, when we go to those meetings, they don't really emphasize, they're not so bothered about why you became an alcoholic or an addict. They're just interested in, okay, you've got this problem, now this is the solution. But more like modern thinking on addiction, most people will, there's the guy called Gabor Mate, for example, who's written a lot on, he's made videos about addiction. And his theory is that people that have addiction, they tend to have had some kind of childhood trauma. Would you agree with that?
I can't go into it. I've said it. Can I say it?
Well, it's up to you, man. You don't have to reveal anything you don't want to. But what I'm saying is...
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It doesn't matter. But we don't have to necessarily go into the details of that. But he's probably right, because when we listen to people in the meetings and they're talking about their experience, like most of them, the reality is they've had some kind of fucking trauma, haven't they, of some kind in their background. There's very few people that have just had... There are some people, actually, who they say, yeah, I had a great childhood, it was all amazing. But most people have had something, haven't they?
What, so it's kind of a ghetto for people who have had trauma? It's like a ghetto?
Well, would you describe it like that? I mean, I suppose it kind of is, isn't it, really?
And once you're in, you can't get out.
It's like the mafia.
Once you're in, you can't get out.
Yeah, so our mutual friend, the Irish man that we both know, I've seen him post on Instagram a few times. He says 12-step recovery, it's like the mafia. Once you're in, you can't leave, or you die.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. Again, this is orthodoxy from the 12-step recovery movement. Is it true, though? Because I know people who, they drank, they did drugs, they had a big problem with it.
Go on.
Maybe they went to rehab.
Okay.
And now they don't go to meetings or anything, but they're all right.
Yeah, but
we don't need to go into the details, but basically, from what I understand, you had a little bit of a family situation. It kind of went a bit over the top.
Yeah.
It wasn't. You're amenable now with the family members. It's not like it wasn't that bad, but it was bad enough. Do you regret that now?
It's part.
But you were also not well as well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was. I've got a mental health condition. Did I say?
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about that? What?
Carry on with your flow.
Well, so
bring it in if you want.
So basically, right. So if I look back on my life, there's a very obvious correlation between my childhood, which wasn't the worst childhood in the world by any means. I wasn't like physically abused, I wasn't sexually abused or anything like that. But we certainly had a very unconventional family life, and I had myself and my sister. We had a very bad relationship with my stepmother. We were estranged from my real mother for many, many years. There was just a lot of weird shit going on in the family.
Have you been to therapy?
I actually did.
What happened?
Well, so basically what happened...
What happened was, you give me a synopsis of what years of therapy would have helped you help with your synopsis of that.
Well, I feel...
Which was pretty clear and succinct.
Well, I feel a lot better about talking about this stuff now, because I went to therapy, and I was going to therapy actually for quite a long time. Because the thing is, we go to these meetings and we can talk about this shit to an extent, but it's like you always say, you only get like 3 minutes.
Yeah, you get 40 minutes of the Samaritan.
Yeah, or if you go to a therapist, you'll get like an hour or 50 minutes.
Yeah, Harley Street therapist, yeah.
Yeah, so, but anyway, the point I was making was there was a very, when you look at it, there was a very clear correlation, because I've been in this fucked up family situation. It was very repressive. It was very, I was not happy, having a hard time, whatever. I left home to go to university. I went to Manchester, and then almost immediately I just started getting completely fucked. Yeah. So, anybody looking at that from the outside would say, well, it's obvious. You had this kind of traumatic childhood, and then you immediately, as soon as you could to escape that, you went into drugs and alcohol.
So have all artists, filmmakers, people in the creative industry, have they all had a traumatic... Are you in the creative industry?
Well, I kind of, yeah. I'd like to think that. People would say...
Or would I say media?
Well, I'd like to think that. I mean, I would like to think that what I do... You see, people have a bad image of what I do because they're like, dating coach, it's seedy, you're trying to, pull women and blah, blah, blah. But for me, it's slightly different to that. The reason I got into it in the first place was because I wanted to write. Because like you, I mean, you're a writer, really. I'm a writer. Like, I always, one of the first passions that I had was creative writing, right? I wanted to write, but what do you write about, right? And then what I discovered was I also got really into going out and meeting girls. So then I started blogging about meeting girls, and people started to read it, and then I wrote a book about it, and it started to get some traction, and then that's how it all started.
Oh, right, that's interesting. Yeah, so you done all right in the end?
Well, I'm
still doing all right.
Well, yeah, I am. But what I'm saying is that, like, the initial sort of people would think, like, my girlfriend would think, well, actually, I've had this conversation with her, so I've explained it to her. But she would think you got into it because basically you're just a massive sex fiend and you just wanted to get laid and whatever. But the reality is, I wanted to write creatively. But what are people going to want to read? I mean, people don't read novels much anymore, except you. Right, but what they will read is your experiences with women and meeting women and how did you meet this woman, how did you, what happened, blah, blah, blah. So I started writing that, and then people started to read it.
Yeah, but...
So it was kind of like a Henry Miller kind of situation where I was like using the talent that I had in order to create something.
What can you do? Henry Miller, when he with Marilyn Monroe?
Was he?
He married her.
I think you might be right.
Marilyn Monroe, yeah.
Have you read any of his stuff?
I think I've got Tropic of Capricorn on the shelf in front. I could go home and read it tonight. You
should read it, man. He is a fucking great... I mean, he's kind of... I always sort of see him as being... Do you know Hubert Selby Jr.?
Oh, right. Got
he wrote... have you heard of Last Exit to Brooklyn?
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I had that as well. So.
Yeah. So I always think of them as being... quite similar. They were sort of like beat writers, it's like the 50s. But particularly Henry Miller, he was obsessed with sex. So a lot of his stuff was about sex, his sexual experience, his sexual life.
Did you read Henry Miller before you started your enterprise now?
Yeah, I did actually.
Did it influence you?
Yeah, I mean, and he is a fucking phenomenal writer. The other guy, of course, is Bukowski.
All right. Oh,
do you know any Bukowski?
Don't know nothing about him.
All right, so I'll lend you some. You remember we went to...
you bought 2 books on him.
Yeah, when we went to Foyles, I bought 2 poetry books by Bukowski. So I think... So I mentioned Hubert Selby Jr., but actually Bukowski is probably the better comparison because Bukowski was also a massive perv. So he was a very literary man. He was a writer. But he would write a lot about his sex life. Yeah. So there's a book by him called Women, which is basically, he became famous. He became quite famous as a poet. He'd go around and do readings in Los Angeles and stuff. And then he'd get all these young, 25-year-old groupies. He was 50. He worked in the post office till he was 50. Then he gave up his job, became a full-time writer, became famous, and all these young women wanted to have sex with him. So then he wrote about that.
Yeah, well, there you go. Encyclopedic knowledge. It helped him, his experiences he probably put into his writing, right?
But I don't think a lot of that stuff will get published now.
No.
I mean, one of the issues that we've got is in our lifetime, right? It's become like political correctness has become much more of a thing, hasn't it?
Yeah. Woke. Is it woke?
It's like woke. One of the problems that we've got as we've got older in our lifetime, right? What's happened is that basically heterosexual men have become the enemy